Welcome to VoteProPot-Cast, the award-winning cannabis news podcast brought to you by VoteProPot.com. Here are your hosts, Phil Adams, Jay Britton, and Andrew McCreadies.
Governor Cuomo signed into law legislation making cannabis legal in the Empire State. Ever wonder what happens to your brain and your body when you quit using cannabis? We'll get into that. And I've got some historical fun facts regarding ancient cannabis use. Welcome to episode 159 of VoteProPot-Cast. Jay Britton here. You may have noticed that I've been relegated to the MC duties of the episode today. My esteemed colleague Phil Adams is enjoying a much-deserved vacation. Phil is visiting his recently birthed granddaughter. How exciting is that? So the whole team here sends him the warmest regards to Grandpa Phil and Maggie and Jason. Brother Drew is still absent, sending our positive thoughts to him. Good luck, buddy. Rather than flying solo, VoteProPot's chief health and wellness correspondent, Faye Berger Mitchell, has agreed to take a break from studying to keep me company and to bring you the latest cannabis news. Welcome back, Faye.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I've been doing an exam today, and it's like kicking my butt. I'm telling you.
Man.
This shit is hard.
The last time I had to do an exam was 40 years ago. But you know what's weird? I still have that dream. You have that dream? You know that dream where you're running down the halls of school and your pants aren't on, you left them at home, and you forgot about studying for your final?
It's funny. Mine takes on a different turn. Mine is I'm at a conference and I'm not ready.
Oh, that's
like I don't have my clothes. For 2 days in a row I dreamed that I didn't have a dress. You know, so like
mine's much more Freudian than yours, and that's a whole nother subject. So tell the listeners what you got going on, why you're studying, what you're doing.
You know, it's been really fascinating. I'm in my third module of this program, and right now I'm doing cannabinoid chemistry and drug delivery. But we've learned about policy and history and culture. We learned about like evidence-based medicine, which was really new stuff to me because I'm an old dietitian, so I didn't learn that stuff back in college.
You're not that old.
No, not really. And it's really been eye-opening because I think I've changed my attitude somewhat towards cannabis.
Is that right?
Yeah, the more that I learn, the more I'm a little bit more, I don't want to say negative about it because I'm not. I still think it's an important medicine. I think it's important that it's legal because I think there are a lot of people in jail because of cannabis.
Absolutely.
Which is totally not right. But I do really feel regulatory issues need to be brought up. So
I agree with you, and I feel like Andrew, Phil, and I have been doing this show for almost 3 years. I can't believe it. But the longer we do this, and the more articles we cover, and I'm just being honest, the more I question the validity of some of the anecdotal stories I hear about. It's a cure for everything. My cancer is gone, and I grew the finger back that I cut off at I'm with you. I think that we have to look at this in black and white. The research is starting to come in now, the real research.
Some of it, yes.
Just beginning to. So I think we'll see, we'll get a better feel for what's that. And that has nothing to do with whether or not it should be legal. 100%.
Absolutely.
Got to be legal and regulated.
Alcohol's regulated.
Right. Cigarettes Yeah, absolutely. Tobacco. Yeah. So the program you're in is a master's program at the University of Maryland.
Medical Cannabis Science and Therapeutics.
Very sweet.
It's the first in the country. There are some programs that are now popping up in different universities about cannabis. Some schools are putting classes in, others are putting in programs. Some of them are in like integrative medicine schools versus like traditional universities. Uh-huh. But there's a lot of interest, and there are a lot of people studying it.
Well, that's good. That's what we need. Yeah, that's what we need.
So one of the things that was really interesting to me when I was going through, all of the studies, we have a lot of reading to do, a lot of Googling, but also a lot of really intense articles and, papers to read. And one of the things to me that was really interesting is that there actually is put out by the American Medical Association, the medical board expectations for physicians recommending cannabis.
Wow.
So there are guidelines. I mean, there truly are guidelines. Yeah, I know. But I guess, what's happening is they know it's becoming legal state by state, and it would be really, it would irresponsible not to have guidelines.
That makes sense. I didn't know that.
Here's the interesting thing. I mean, we have all these pot docs or these pot factories or whatever you want to call them, where you can get on a Zoom call for 15 minutes, tell a guy what medicine you're taking, or, it used to be you had to go in person, but now with COVID, whatever. You tell them what you're, I've got anxiety and I'm taking this medicine.
Can't sleep.
And da-da-da-da-da. I mean, my last recertification, I had a specific question for the doctor and he had no clue what I was talking about.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I knew more than he did. So, but I mean, some of these guidelines really go back to practicing good medicine. So, for example, they want you to do a patient evaluation, and the minimum things that should be required in a patient evaluation would be a patient history and their present illness, a social history, alcohol and substance abuse history.
No comment.
A physical exam and other criteria. There's a lot of other criteria. But when
blood
you go
pressure,
if you go to see your doctor,
all the stuff you get every time.
He's not going to look at you and say, "Oh yeah, you look pretty good. Let me prescribe you some Xanax," or whatever.
Right.
There are parameters and there are things that they measure.
Faye, I didn't know that. I didn't know such a thing existed because I brought it up, with my personal physician. And he poo-pooed the whole thing.
Oh, they always do.
Yeah, because they haven't been taught anything about it, and they don't know anything. And I understand where they're coming from.
Right, exactly. I do too. And there actually is an organization called I think it's the Cannabis Clinicians Society or the Society of Cannabis Clinicians. And for any physicians who are listening, they have an entire continuing education program. And it's put together by doctors who know their shit.
Well, I would think you'd want to do that if you're a physician in a state that has a medical program, which are 3/4 of the states now.
Right.
I would think you'd want to be a part of that.
I mean, I think part of the issue is that it's really hard to practice medicine these days with all the subspecialties and the amount of papers and research coming out each day. But I think there should be a minimum that I think they're interested. And I think this society is trying to get the word out that they exist and that they provide this medical education. One of our Maryland doctors, Patricia Fry, is very involved in that society. I think she's one of the really smartest cannabis doctors out there. She's right here in Maryland. And, I get into these clubhouse rooms with these pharmacists and these scientists, and they know their stuff. I think there are way more questions than answers, and they don't all agree, but it's really quite fascinating. And
I think doctors are looking for clinical trials, studies, and there isn't a lot of that yet.
No, there's no evidence-based medicine. That's what they're looking for. All of those trials have to go to through clinicaltrials.gov, and if it's illegal, they're not going to approve the trials. And then there's also another. There's a Federation of State Medical Boards, and they also put out a paper on model guidelines for the recommendations of cannabis in patient care. Similar, very clear guidelines. So the guidelines do exist, and this is where I would like to see more regulation in. When doctors are prescribing cannabis, well, no, you can't prescribe. You can only recommend because it's illegal. But when they are recommending cannabis and seeing a patient to recommend cannabis, I want to see them practice good medicine.
Just like they would for any other ailment or any other medication.
Exactly. Like I said, cannabis is not innocuous. There are risks associated with it. And in what I've seen, because I did work at a dispensary, so I've seen kind of both sides of it, the cannabis companies, it's all about making money.
Right.
So they're not paying attention.
Listen, I know in Virginia we have a medical program, and I paid my $150 and I had my virtual, whatever consultation, I guess you would say, with, I'm making air quotes, medical person.
Exactly.
It lasted 35 seconds.
Exactly. No,
it was just okay, that's great. Send me a check next. And I don't mean to downgrade these people, but it is really just a money making business. at least the way they're handling it now. So it's really encouraging to hear that those organizations exist. I had no idea. You're just a wealth of knowledge.
Oh, yeah, there you go. I mean,
that's why you're here, okay?
These organizations exist, and I'm really all for more regulation and also preserving the medical aspect of cannabis. I mean, I think my point of view at this point is it should be legal for adult use, no question about it. It should be regulated, but we also need to make sure it's really good medicine if it's practiced properly. So we just really need to make sure that this medical side of it doesn't get left in the dust.
Well, and I think it's what makes cannabis so unique is the fact that you've got two sides of a scale with these compounds. You've got the medical side and you've got the recreational side. Name me another compound, another element, another product. There aren't any.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. You don't use alcohol for medicinal purposes.
No.
You don't use tobacco for medicinal purposes.
Right.
You don't use cocaine anymore for medicinal purposes.
Used to, yeah, but yeah.
You know, I guess you could kind of say opioids because some people use them for fun, but that's not proper. I mean, it's not right.
That's not how they're supposed to use it.
That's not the intent. So it is a whole new universe for a compound is, you know, to have this scale, and how do you balance that scale? And that's really what I think people are trying to work out now. Don't you think? I mean, trying to figure out how do we do this as a look, I've been saying this for a couple of years to my colleagues. Being in Virginia, where we have a fairly new medical program, I don't, and I'm going to get mail. People are going to bitch at me and give me shit. I don't think it's a medical program. It's a place to go get high. Because when I go in there, nobody asks me the questions.
Because
What's ailing you? Nobody's talking to me about dosing or when to take it or what not to take it with.
Exactly.
None of that stuff happens.
Exactly.
So
and
it's just an excuse for people to, and I'm not knocking it. I think it should be legal. I think it should be adult use. But that's because I believe in liberty. I believe we should do whatever I want to do. I should be able to do with my body as long as I'm not hurting anybody else. That's a whole nother subject.
Well, and you know, the thing is, what makes it so complicated is that it is a plant.
Yeah.
So they can study these isolated compounds. However, when you're talking about a plant and how they interact, how each of the cannabinoids interact, it makes it that much more difficult.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
each chemovore is different. So you're never replicating the same exact chemical composition.
Yeah. It's very, very delicate and elaborate science.
It is.
All right, let's move on to some news. What do you say?
Okay.
First, I'm going to talk about New York. Big news yesterday.
Yep.
The governor, Andrew Cuomo, signed a marijuana legalization bill into law on Wednesday, which is yesterday. We're recording on Thursday, just hours after lawmakers sent it to his desk. So New York is now the 16th state with legal adult use. We are looking at Virginia being 17th very soon. I mean, I think it's happening. But anyway, Andy Cuomo's been in the news lately.
Well, so let me ask you, is that to divert attention away from what else is going on?
Don't you think?
That's what everybody says.
Right. Don't you think? I mean, look, this guy, as recently as 2 years ago, I think, maybe 3, he was the guy who was absolutely against any kind of legalization in New York. Not only that, he called it a gateway drug multiple times. I mean, just a couple of years ago. And all of a sudden now, this is his comment today. And I'm quoting the governor of New York. The bill creates automatic expungement of previous marijuana convictions that would now be legal. This is an historic day, one that rights the wrongs of the past by putting an end to the harsh prison sentences, embraces an industry that will grow the Empire State's economy, and prioritizes marginalized communities so those that have suffered the most will be the first to reap the benefits. Yep. Now, I agree with all that. I mean,
so do I. But can we say me too?
But my God, the guy 2 years ago was saying that it's a gateway drug. So
Me Too movement, let me tell you.
I will say this. I've read through the bill a little bit, and I feel like it's a very well-written bill. It took them forever to get this together. I mean, they've been sticking around with this for years, literally. And then when they get the bill done, it's signed in hours because, let's face it, Andy needs to get himself off the news the way they're covering it right now.
He needs some positive press.
Don't you think?
Yeah.
Let me run through a couple of the bullet points here for the bill. Adults 21 and older can possess up to, I think, 3 ounces, which is a lot of weed, man. 3 ounces or 24 grams of concentrates. They're saying that this program is going to launch sometime in next year, 2022. Adults can also cultivate up to 6 plants for personal use and up to 12 for a household with more than one person. Homegrown won't take effect until regulators set the rules, which is not uncommon. But they're also only giving them 6 months to do it for medical. So that's good. They said you got 6 months. So those who are opposed to this can't drag it out and keep coming up with amendments and all that bullshit. They got 6 months to get it done. People with convictions for marijuana-related activity, which are made legal under this law, will be automatically expunged, their records. That's awesome.
I mean, I like that. It's
awesome. They don't have to go get a freaking lawyer and go to a judge and all that happy horse shit.
Right.
Boom, it's done. It's done the day the bill's signed. Social consumption sites and delivery services will be permitted, which is great. And I've got a story, if we have time today, I've got a story on social consumption or cannabis, cannabis lounges. There's a new office.
It's the big thing. These cannabis lounges are the big thing.
Yeah, I have a really interesting story on that if we can get to it. If not, I'll do it next week. There's a new office being set up called the Office of Cannabis Management. It's an independent agency operating as part of the New York State Liquor Authority.
Interesting.
Be responsible for regulating the recreational cannabis market as well as the existing medical marijuana and hemp programs, blah, blah. Be a 5-member board. This is the part I like. 3 of the members would be appointed by the governor, and the Senate and Assembly would appoint the others. So all their cousins and uncles and aunts will be getting very rich off this.
I'd like to see patients on those boards.
Yeah.
I'd love to see patient advocates. And by the way, right now, flower is not legal in Maryland. I mean, in New York.
Yeah, that's right.
Their medical program does not allow flower.
No, either does Virginia, but it will be in New York with this bill, and in Virginia in July.
Right.
Cannabis products would be subject. Okay, are you sitting down? You ready for this? This is New York. Let's remember that.
Okay.
Cannabis products would be subject to the following state taxes: a 9% plus an additional 4% local.
Wow.
Okay, which would be split between counties, cities, towns, and villages, with 75% of the local earnings going to municipalities and 25% going to counties. But listen, the marijuana distributors would also face a THC tax. So they're going to pay. They're going to pay a shit ton for this. It is New York. I mean, my God.
But some of the programs, because here's the question: once something becomes legal, adult use, why should a person become a patient? Well, some of the states are you're exempt from the taxes if you register as a patient.
That's true.
So I'm wondering if they'll put that in.
That's a very good point, because that is the case in many jurisdictions. I have not noticed that yet, reading through all this shit in the New York bill.
Right. They need to do that.
They need to do that. Because, I mean, we're looking at just off the top, just the state and the local taxes, 13%, I think. And then you've got a THC tax. It's just astronomical. And keep in mind, these freaking businesses can't write any of this shit off.
No.
So if they do $1 million a year, they pay taxes on $1 million.
And how much is it going to cost somebody? It will be very expensive to purchase.
Set up, So some other points in this bill, Faye, the police cannot use an odor of cannabis to justify searches. That's awesome.
That's in Maryland too.
Yeah, that is. Yep. It's great. Current medical cannabis businesses could participate in the recreational market in exchange for licensing fees, of course.
Yes, of course.
Let's see here. Cuomo made several concessions to the legislation that represent large differences from the legalization plan he proposed in his annual budget. So accepting provisions allowing home cultivation and directing how to distribute cannabis tax revenues for social equity programs. There's a lot of social equity stuff in here, which is great.
And that's what we want to see.
I feel like it's a good bill. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a politician, and I'm not an expert in bills. But just reading through it as a novice, as a regular person, there's some really good stuff in here. So I think New York has done a good job. Again, I'll mention before we close out here that for Virginia, we talked about they passed the bill. It's sitting on the governor's desk. He's agreed to sign it. Now the problem with it was they're legalizing adult, but they weren't going to have it start until 2024. And there's such a rigmarole about that. People are like, what? How can it take that long? 3 years? Right. So the governor wants an amendment that says it'll start this July.
Well, that's good. And two key things.
3 months.
That's great. And I want two key things I think that are important when it goes adult use is what I said before. I think that people who register as a patient should not be taxed in the same rate. And I think social equity programs should be built in. I just think that's good practice.
And I think pretty much all of the new legislation coming about on all the new states have at least the social equity part, because that's imperative.
Right.
I mean, that's imperative. Now, the tax part, these are some hungry politicians.
Right. Well, Boston, if you register, a lot of them, Massachusetts, if you register. Too. Yeah. Well, Maryland's not legal adult use yet.
Yeah, but
right. So like in Massachusetts, if you're a registered patient, I think in some dispensaries you have priority.
Yeah.
And you also don't pay a tax.
I believe California's that way too. So Virginia, we're looking at a change. Also, real quickly, New Mexico, their legislature just passed an adult use bill, which is on the governor's desk, which he plans to sign. So, that should go into effect sometime next year. So now we have New Mexico too. So now we're up to 17, 18 states? Cranking it out, baby. So, Faye, you've got a story on what happens to your mind and body when you quit using weed from a medical standpoint, I suppose.
Well, it's based on a sort of like a case study or an article about a specific woman who gave some reports. So the article necessarily wasn't entirely accurate, but I'll just, insert my opinions because I've learned a lot about it. So, there is something called cannabis withdrawal syndrome. And so people do withdrawal from weed if they either quit or significantly lower their consumption.
Right. Uh-huh.
And I personally think we're seeing more and more of it attributed to these higher THC products. It's not the stems that we used to have back.
That's
the stems and seeds we used to have.
Sticks
the Mexican,
and seeds.
Exactly. Right. I think this stuff is getting really strong, and it's creating more issues for a lot of people. So some of the I want to say side effects or symptoms that a person may feel as part of this withdrawal syndrome is anxiety and depressed mood. Irritability is a big one.
Sleep disorders.
Yes,
absolutely.
sleep issues.
I've seen that myself.
Yep. Restlessness and other physical symptoms. But the good news is that the withdrawal from cannabis is not dangerous as it would be for alcohol or opioids. You may feel like shit, or you may not feel well, or be irritable or angry for a couple weeks or so. But
if that long, really.
If that long, right.
Yeah.
I think it really depends on how much is built into your system.
I think so too.
And also how much, basically, people are different. People respond differently to different things. Some people don't experience this at all. So, I've
witnessed it in other people that use a lot more than me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just anecdotally, they've told me, I smoked a lot. I smoked all day long for, I don't know, maybe years, let's say. Mm-hmm. And then I decided it wasn't working for me and I quit. And they said, man, I don't know if you know who Kristen Yoder is.
No.
But she's pretty well known in the circles in podcasting and cannabis, and an advocate. And she's a really well-respected pro-cannabis person.
Mm-hmm.
She quit.
So did I.
Exactly. You should talk about that.
I want to
she
talk
talks
about that,
how she quit because she realized that she was I don't want to speak for her, but she's on a podcast that I saw. I was just trying to look it up and I can't find it. But it really was engaging because she said, look, don't get me wrong. I'm still 100% pro legalization.
So am I. I think you have the right.
I have decided that for me, it's time to not partake anymore. She said I was waking up in the morning and smoking from the time I got up till I went to bed. Mm-hmm. And she said, again, like you're saying, Faye, and you're an expert, the weed's getting so strong that she talked about an incident she had where she literally passed out one time.
Wow. And
at a conference or something.
I mean, like I was sort of using it medicinally microdosing, but I'm no stranger to weed. I've been smoking,
Sure.
since back in the
You were a
day.
teenager. Yeah. Sure.
I mean,
Right.
admittedly,
Understood.
but I don't think I fell under the stoner category,
No, not at all.
apathetical, whatever. I've been
Right.
very successful, whatever. But I think the weed got stronger, and it kind of has this paradoxical effect. There's a sweet spot. And once you go over this sweet spot, you start having negative consequences versus positive reactions. I think we should talk about this another time. I'd love to come on and talk
in more
about
detail.
it. But
I agree. That's a
the
good
cannabinoid
topic.
hyperemesis syndrome, I would love to talk about it some other time, because I think it is on the rise. Here's the funny thing. Doctors don't even, I'm talking about cannabis doctors. Some of them are like poo-pooing it. No, it can't be too strong.
Really?
But anything can be too strong.
Absolutely. Caffeine, you can have, start drinking espressos 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day.
You can have a heart attack.
It's different from having a cup of coffee in the morning.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah. So, I think, again, we're going back to responsibility, using whatever.
And you know what? Being honest.
Yeah.
People like us who are, we're totally pro cannabis legalization.
Absolutely.
But it's time to be honest and not just preach one side and never listen to the other side. That's one thing we try to do here on our podcast is we will cover stories that are negative or not quite as positive.
You have to tell the truth. And
you have to be honest.
I really think part of the problem with people not being honest in general is because the doctors are so anti-cannabis. I think they get a lot further. I'd love to go speak to some physicians and say, you need to look out for this syndrome. You need to add this to your questionnaire.
That's right.
They ask you about alcohol, and it's not even illicit. I don't even want it under illicit substances. Like I don't want it with opioids. And
no.
Cocaine. I want it as a question like, what kinds of supplements do you take? It's a supplement.
They ask you if you drink and how do you drink.
Right.
They'll say, do you drink alcohol? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How do you drink? Are you socially? And then they'll ask you how many drinks you have a week.
Right.
So how is that any different?
Well, but see, I'd even like to see it even more because I think it's part of a wellness routine.
I see.
Medical cannabis or recreational cannabis, if used properly, can be part of your wellness routine. But again, there's that sweet spot. So I used to ask patients what supplements they're using because I was a dietitian. I think it almost needs to be under that. What supplements and
that's a good point.
It's an herbal remedy, isn't it?
Yeah. And they do interact with other things, is what you're saying. So the bottom line here is what you're saying is people say, I've been hearing forever, there is no side effect to weed.
Yes.
There is no withdrawal. I don't think that's exactly true.
It is not true at all. And I think everybody needs to be aware of that. And if you think you have a problem, hey, I have a new website, by the way.
Oh.
FayeCannaConsulting.com.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer questions.
Excellent. That's FAYE Consulting.
Canna. CANNA Consulting.
We'll put that in the show notes.
I appreciate that because I'm trying to help people. That's my goal, is to help people use cannabis responsibly, medically or recreationally, but responsibly.
A couple weeks ago, we started a new little segment here on the history of weed. Right? Lots of different. We did a thing on Cheech and Chong. Which people don't really know all they need to know about Cheech and Chong.
I had a whole module on that.
I'm going to do a little segment today. We'll test you afterwards. We'll see how much of this you know. And this is, I decided to do fun facts on ancient history of cannabis. Okay? So we're going way back here. And we'll start with modern humans, because modern humans, according to the fossil record, are first found about 250,000 years ago, 250,000 years ago, a long time, right? Mm-hmm. But the fossil record shows that agriculture wasn't really in any kind of normal use until about 10,000 years ago. That's a blip, a blip. So it's very recent. Archaeologists believe that hemp was probably, if not the first, one of the first, and likely the first plant used in agriculture. And for a number of reasons. They believe it's because it grew fast, it was very simple to grow, and it had a lot of uses. You could do a lot of things with it. An archaeological site in Oki Islands near Japan contain cannabis acene, which is any kind of fruit with a seed in it. So it'd be like a bud in cannabis. And they found some in this site that were 10,000 years old, which indicated that they were using them to replant and so forth. So that's where that 10,000 years comes from. Hemp use dates back to the Neolithic age in China.
Wow.
Where they found hemp fibers in pottery that from about 6,000 years ago. And of course, later the Chinese developed hemp and used it for clothing and shoes and
which is what we should be doing now because
exactly.
It's eco-friendly. But yeah.
So it's very interesting to think about that. And one of the quotes that I love is Carl Sagan was a big hero of mine, and he wrote a book in 1977, which was the year we graduated from high school.
Yeah.
And I read the book, and it was called The Dragons of Eden, and it was just a brilliant book, really, really insightful. But one of the things, he talked about weed in there, which is,
right.
This is 1977. One of the things he said is, it would be wildly interesting if in human history, the cultivation of marijuana led generally to the invention of agriculture and thereby to civilization. Because really, what created civilization was agriculture.
Right.
Before that, we were hunter-gatherers. We ran around and
right.
And it wasn't until we settled down and started raising animals and plants that we became civilized, that we built permanent buildings.
Right.
And the
exactly.
deal, right? So hemp was first used as a food source by the Chinese around 8,000 years ago. They would eat the seeds. They would add them to food. And then they started using it for textiles. They found records in archaeological sites about 6,000 years ago in China and Turkestan. But the first recorded use of cannabis medicine is by a gentleman named Emperor Shen Yang from China. And that was about 5,000 years ago.
Yep. Yeah, we read about that.
So when did humans first start burning cannabis? Like as a method of employing the psychoactive properties? Science isn't really 100% sure, but there's indications that in Chinese cultures, they started using the plant. And what they would do is they would take the seeds and they would put them in pots and burn it like incense, and then smell the incense in closed areas like in caves or huts or whatever.
Right. And used as part of religious ceremonies as well.
Absolutely, exactly.
Big with religious ceremonies back in the
So it's really pretty likely. Science is coming to the consensus that cannabis and hemp originally was a very low THC plant. Like hemp is now.
Yep.
And that humans actually, through the earliest forms of genetic engineering, actually created these high THC plants.
Yes.
So that they could get high, so that they could use it for their, like you said,
right, for
religious ceremonies and that kind of thing.
And that we do have an endocannabinoid system that has a balance. And
exactly.
This is probably a huge part of it. It just it helped balance out this endocannabinoid system. They didn't know about it, but that's what it was doing.
Yeah. So they found seeds in graves of the shamans in China and Siberia from about 2,500 years ago that had been burned. So that's they know that long ago they were burning it.
Wow.
And why else would they burn it? A little seed.
Exactly.
Obviously they were. And also, this is interesting. We did a story on this. I did a story on this about a year and a half ago about an archaeological dig where they found a 2,500-year-old tomb. And inside that tomb, they found these really cool little wooden bowls. And the bowls had stones in them. And they could tell they were used for burning something. So they did some chemical analysis on the rocks in the wood. And what they found is cannabis with really high THC levels.
Well, because when you burn it, that the THC levels get the decarboxylation. That's
exactly
the resin that stays are very high, but still,
it's the THC still has to be there to carboxylate
exactly.
it. So they were genetically engineering hemp and making it higher and higher and higher in THC. So they were rocking it, those Chinese shamans.
You mentioned that they were eating the seeds and whatever. I think there's a big movement now to eat raw cannabis, whether you're juicing it or you're eating the seeds. And you don't get high. Yeah, and I honestly think we're going to find a really good, positive, medicinal or wellness routine with that. We just don't know it yet.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And we've had people on the show who are big proponents for the whole plant thing. You don't get high, but you still get all the nutrients. So anyway, those are some of my facts. So
cool.
We totally owe this whole thing, including this podcast, to the Chinese shamans.
And then along came the damn war on drugs, and that screwed it all up.
There you go. We're going to close out with this story, Faye. You've got something about women in cannabis and what nobody's talking about? What's that?
Well, it's not really that nobody's talking about it, but, from Green Entrepreneur, it's just about women in cannabis.
I love that website.
Yeah. And it is a good website. And basically, the demographics of the cannabis consumer are changing. And, it's no longer the male stoner.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting about that is when I would go into dispensaries, I would be like, these guys would ignore me.
Really?
These stoner guys would ignore me. And I was just this little old lady walking into the dispensary.
Little old lady.
Yeah, no, seriously. And I don't look at myself like that at all. I feel like I'm not a little old lady.
You're not a little old lady.
I try to start a conversation about terpenes with these guys and they go, yeah, whatever.
They have no idea.
Seriously. No, they knew what I was talking about. They just had no interest in engaging me. It's seen as a wellness product, right? That we're starting to see CBD products. And then, of course, we're using medicinal cannabis for wellness. And, women are more into wellness in general.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I'm not,
true.
But in general, they're into wellness products, beauty products, oils and that kind of thing.
Sure.
And so what they're finding out is that it's the fastest growing consumer segment in the cannabis market. And women traditionally are the ones who drive the household purchases.
I think they buy, I read somewhere 80%.
Yeah.
80% of all health products.
Yeah, health and beauty products.
Health and wellness, health and beauty
and wellness products. Absolutely.
I think women buy around 80% of it.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
That's a huge market.
It's more and more popular. Even younger women, back little, 18-year-olds are buying this kind of stuff. So, yeah. But the women have higher expectations. And so,
for quality,
quality. They want pure ingredients. They want clear labeling. They want organic. They worry about, what's this going? They worry more about what it will do in their body.
I can see that.
And they want to know this. And so, the brands need to start tailoring their products and their marketing. And also the women want more education on the products.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they also want more customer service. That kind of goes back to, this whole bro culture that I've experienced in dispensaries. And
present company excluded, I hope.
Oh, absolutely. These were these young guys, right?
Yeah,
whatever.
I know, yeah.
And, I think that they have to realize that this is a big segment of the market. And the other thing is that women, I've had this story many times. I've had people call me and say, I walked into the dispensary. I wanted something for sleep. And the guy, it's always the guy, sorry, no, the guy behind the counter just kept selling me stuff that he says, oh, this will get you really high. Oh, this one will get you even more high.
Yeah,
so the people, there's this disconnect between what the women are looking for in their products and what the people in the dispensary are trying to sell them or how they're treating them. And so all I keep thinking is that song, that's right, the women are smarter. Good old Grateful Dead. But,
they got a point.
They do. They really do.
I will say real quick, we did an episode, our last week's episode, 158, we interviewed Gina Dubb and Dr. Leslie Apgar, which were fascinating women. Mm-hmm. They are two women who teamed up to start a dispensary, and they were voted Dispensary of the Year. They were on the Today Show. But they talk about some of the issues that they had as women dealing with, the men's club.
Oh,
so
absolutely. I mean, I know that I was passed over for an outreach position because the guy got it.
Wow.
And I mean, I could see him broing up to the manager before
Gotcha.
And I could feel it in the air when I was going for my interview. I also feel like I was a little too medical and they wanted more sales oriented people. But I'm glad to hear about these two women because I think the women, and there are a lot of groups emerging, like Women in Cannabis.
Absolutely.
Because we're kind of watching out for each other.
Yeah, and women have taken a real interest in it. And, I think just in general, the industry itself tends to be more open.
Yeah.
Because of the type of industry it is. So they're more open to women businesses. I hope.
In a way. But let me tell you, if you look at the corporate structure, if you look at these cannabis companies, and you look at the pictures of the people who are at the top, it's all white men. And
no, you're right.
I have to say, that's.
Nothing against white men.
No, I have nothing against white men. I mean, but
no, you're right.
I think these women. Because I honestly have this opinion that if you're a woman, you have to be that much more smarter to get to where the men are. It just is. You just got to be that much more on top of things. And so I think these women are the ones who are going to help maintain the medicinal side of it, because they realize that there is a need for it. And it's not just the whole stoner culture thing.
Well, everybody, thanks a lot for listening to Vote Pro Podcast today. Thank you, Faye, for being here. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me. I'll come anytime you want me to come on the show. I'm here. And
don't forget to check out Faye Berger Mitchell's website. If you have any questions about medical or nutritional use cannabis, you can find her at FayeCannaConsulting.com. That's FAYE CannaConsulting.com. If you like the show, do us a favor, go to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating, leave a comment. You can reach us by emailing us at podcast, that's pod, not pot, podcast at VoteProPot.com. We have a message line at 240-257-2441. And we ask that you go to our social media pages because we post a lot of articles and stuff up there. We can't cover it all in a half-hour show, or in this case, a 41-minute show. But so go on our Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter pages and just do a search for Vote Pro Pot.